We're at a very interesting time in our history and in our culture regarding the depictions of people with disabilities in the media. And this would include television, this would include movies, this would include audio and radio. We're seeing more and more efforts like the one that you're doing, where it's not someone else speaking on behalf of the person with the disability. You don't have the teachers or the preachers or the social workers sort of pushing the agenda. But more and more there are opportunities, whether it's via the internet, YouTube, Facebook, for people to blog, to put their own stories out there. And so I think what's happening now is we're seeing a change in the types of stories that are being told. It used to be the disabled person on the outside of society. It was always monochrome in terms of them either being tragic or heroic. Anybody who's lived a little while knows that life is more complex than that. It's more complicated than that. There's a lot more color in the spectrum. But sadly, up until probably the last 10, 15 years, with very rare occasions, we didn't get a chance to see that. I think with more disabled people being creative behind the scenes, whether it's writing, producing, directing, acting, whatever those efforts might be in terms of telling those stories, the stories that we're hearing, the stories that are coming out now, and this is something relatively new in the last 5 years or so, really. I've seen that kind of catapult forward. We're seeing more complexity in those stories, more depth in those stories, more authenticity in those stories. And as a result, they've become less lazy and they've become more interesting because the nuances are all there in ways that we really haven't seen before. There are numerous driving forces behind that happening, I think, right now at our point in time in the culture. Part of it is technology. You can't deny it. 5, 6 years ago, there was no YouTube. You couldn't just take a video on your phone and put it up there for anybody to see. You can do that now. If you do it with some creativity, with some panache, with some sort of a little different spin, right, coming at it from left field or from right field, you can get some traction, you can get some attention. People are no longer limited to the, let's say, television networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, PBS. They can produce a web short, a web series that's 10, 15-minute episodes on their own. Boom, it goes on there, they get a following, they can get funding to actually do the real thing, whether it's a short film or whether it's a feature length. So people now, the blockades have come down. The gatekeepers no longer have the same types of power. If you've got ways to put something creative together because of things like Facebook, because of ways for people to connect and come together that can push that material forward, give people an opportunity to see it, and more we know that people are hungry for that. They're tired of the same old tragic, heroic stories. They want to see more complexity. They want to see themselves represented. And I think we've got more and more opportunities not only to create it and produce it and put it out there, but we're seeing more and more people writing for themselves, directing for themselves, producing for themselves. They're not any more relegated to saying, you do this for me, or trying to put forth that effort. No, they're taking it I think they're taking the responsibility for themselves and creating it themselves, and that's making all the difference. If you think about the ways that cinema informs our culture and our culture informs cinemas, you can't separate one from the other. When in 2012 we did a history of disability in film on Turner Classic Movies. Now that reached 87 million people. And I had the daunting task of sitting down in an attempt to curate this, to watch 237 movies, to decide the 20 that we were going to show. And I knew that in order to be fair to the different communities within the larger disability community, to be fair to the rabid fan base within Turner Classic Movies, you had to have a broad selection. You had to reach a variety of different people, variety of different ways, and you had to give them some combination of films that they thought they knew, that they were familiar with, but maybe had never considered from a disability-centered perspective before. So you're re-looking at films like An Affair to Remember that are beloved, or films like Miracle Worker, or films like Best Years of Our Lives, through a brand new lens, through a slightly different perspective. And then what we were also able to do, because of Turner's library, is go into the vaults and find films that were significant, that were doing things a little bit differently in the 40s, a little bit differently in the 60s, that hadn't been released on DVD yet, maybe because they didn't have the A-name director, or they didn't have the A-list actor, and say, this was significant for that time, this is what they did, why aren't we doing it now? So you have a film like Sign of the Ram that was done in 1948, they built this vehicle for an actress named Susan Peters. Susan Peters was an up-and-coming star. She had become injured and a wheelchair user as a result of a gunshot accident. And the studio loved her so much that they bought the rights to this book, Sign of the Ram, where the protagonist, the matriarch of this family, was sort of hell on wheels, literally, a wheelchair user. Kind of a Joan Crawford character, right? And it was a bravura performance. She chewed the setup on this thing. And you know, because that film had never been released on DVD, it had been lost to history. And so part of the question, we could bring that out of the vault, we could put it on TCM, we could show it with audio description and with open captions, and we could say, if they can create a vehicle and produce a vehicle for a disabled actress in 1948, why aren't they doing more of that in 2012 or 2015 or any of the decades since? And so it was a fantastic opportunity to look back as a way to position ourselves and to say, how do we want to move forward?